Great. Well, thank you all for joining. We're so excited. This is our last event of Postdoc Appreciation Week, and we're so grateful to all of you for joining us along the way. Whether you came to one workshop or many workshops, we're so grateful that you've gotten to take part, and we hope that you enjoyed it. We wanted to let you know that we are recruiting people to our new Postdoc Association. So if you're interested in getting involved in planning events for postdocs, please reach out to ort.admin@uhnresearch.ca. We'd love to tell you more about this opportunity. We also have the opportunity to have a coffee on us this week. And so if you check out the UHN Postdocs Instagram, we have all the instructions there for how you can go to Tim Hortons and get a coffee this week on us. So that's just our way of saying thank you to all of the postdocs. You're such an integral part of our community, and we really appreciate all the contributions you have and you bring to UHN. So thank you, and enjoy a coffee on us. So with that, I'm just going to pass it over to Leanna, and we can get this workshop started.
Perfect. Thanks, Amanda. Well, I will do a very short introduction, but today I have the pleasure of introducing Geremy Capone, who is a chef at ELLICSR. And so we have the pleasure of having him join us today to do a demonstration, a cooking demonstration. He's got some, I think, some healthy meal items on the agenda for today, just to help us to stay on top of our nutritious eating habits, which sometimes get lost while we're doing our postdocs. So without further ado, I will pass the session over to Geremy. And this is your world, Geremy. We're just living in it today.
Well, thank you so much for inviting me. Happy National Postdoc Appreciation Week. Just to again echo, what Amanda and Leanna said. Thank you so much, all of you, for all your contributions. I really appreciate it. So yeah, it's my pleasure today to join you. I guess I think it's the last event. Is the last event of the day. Fantastic. So hopefully I don't make you too hungry. I know it's the end of the day. Probably a little tired. Probably a little hungry. So this might just be a little bit of a tease. I apologize. But hopefully I inspire you to try some of these recipes and to cook a little bit more at home. So just real quickly, a little bit about myself as well in my role here. So I am part of the Cancer Rehabilitation and Survivorship Program. As part of the Princess Margaret Cancer Center. I've been in this very unique role for a little over 10 years now, which is just an absolute privilege. And I get to work with an amazing team that includes our registered dietitian, Stephanie Gladman, who, just a quick shout out to her. She couldn't be here today. She's doing her one-on-ones with patients, but the two of us work together with patients who are either undergoing treatment or post-treatment to teach them a little bit about nutrition, some cooking techniques, recipes to help manage some of the side effects that they may be experiencing. So we do cover everything from taste changes to swallowing difficulties, to nausea, fatigue is a big one as well. And so it's our goal to try to relay some of this information that might help them to better manage and to eat a little bit better. So I think what I'm doing today is, because the topic is obviously healthy eating and time efficiency, I am going to be pulling some of the techniques and tips that we usually teach in our classes. And I'm going to start off with a soup recipe. So just a little, I guess, overview. I'm going to be teaching 3 recipes today. I'm going to be rambling on quite a bit. So please interrupt at any time. If anyone has any questions, cooking related, please ask at any moment. And I think maybe there's an opportunity to share even our link and resources to our website. So if you did want more recipes, we have like 400 recipes on our page with some videos as well, which might be helpful. All right, so first recipe we're going to be making is a coconut squash soup. I think this is kind of like the perfect time heading into fall. Today was, I think, the first time under 15 degrees that I felt like it was, okay, now fall is here and we need some comfort food. And this is one of my favorites to make at home. And the technique itself is great for batch cooking, which is one of the concepts we reiterate quite a bit in our program, because especially when you're short on time or short on energy, you want a healthy meal. It's best to maximize those resources. Put that time in maybe one day, and make a larger meal, and then you can freeze those portions, freeze them, and then you can warm them up whenever you need. And soup is just great for that because it freezes really well. It's mostly water, so you can store it without really much texture change or issues with like freezer burn. So this is going to be a perfect one for batch cooking. I'm going to start off with our aromatics. So anytime we start our recipe, we want to think about, okay, these are the ingredients I'm using, but where's the flavor coming from? Because it doesn't matter how healthy the recipe is for you. If it doesn't taste good, you're probably not going to make it more than once, right? So aromatics, when I talk about aromatics from sort of a culinary perspective, we think of ingredients that bring a lot of flavor. So garlic, onion, carrot, celery, those are sort of your classic ones. What are some, I'm going to throw it out to the group, what are some spices or flavors or aromatics that you really enjoy? Anything. Sage, someone mentioned sage. Yes, sage, fantastic. Yeah. Ginger, beautiful. Another fantastic aromatic. Absolutely.
How about chilies?
Yeah, chilies as well. Chilies bring a ton of flavor and some spice too, but you can find mild chilies that, if you're not a big fan of spice, that still bring a lot of flavor, bring a lot of aroma to the dish without being on that like spicy end. But if you like spicy, then yeah, there's so many options as well. Perfect. I may have missed a couple of other in the chat. Let me open the chat box here. Okay, got it. Ginger, sage, yeah. Beautiful. So for today, I'm going to be using, and I'm going to bring it down. I'll be moving the camera around from time to time, so don't mind me. So we're going to be using some pretty standard, pretty traditional aromatics for this. So I have some onion, just roughly chopped. Again, you don't have to be fancy with it. This is red onion, but it can be any onion. This is just kind of what I had. Garlic, so a nice clove of garlic, and some ginger as well. So these are going to be sort of our three main aromatics, and then we're going to introduce some spices to them. And what I'm going to do with the garlic is I'm just going to crush it with the side of my knife. I want to leave it relatively whole because this will allow me to just extract a little bit more flavor while I'm sauteing without the risk of it burning too quickly. If it's minced really, really fine, then you gotta have to keep a lower heat or just make sure you keep an eye on it because of the smaller particles, it will just burn a lot faster. So because I'm pureeing this soup anyways, I'm just gonna leave it fairly whole, just give it a nice little crush. And then with the ginger, just a nice little like tablespoon, thumb-sized piece of ginger. I'll just slice that. But I can really do the same thing if I didn't want to bother with slicing it, just kind of crush it. And again, just roughly because I'm going to be pureeing this anyways. Okay, so I have my three main aromatics here, and I'm going to slide you over to my pot now. All right, so you can kind of see it on the angle. So I have this medium heat, and I'm using olive oil. This is just like a regular, nothing fancy, just a regular grade olive oil, which is okay, can tolerate medium heat. I am of Italian descent, and so it's kind of a rule in my family, I guess an unwritten rule, you got to use olive oil. But in the case when you're cooking, just make sure that you do use an oil that does have a higher smoke point. And so what I mean by that is every oil burns sort of at a different temperature. Something with a high smoke point means that it can take a little bit more heat before it starts to burn. So those are things like canola oil, grapeseed oil, avocado oil is a good one. And then sort of like your middle grade, grocery store olive oil has a pretty decent smoke point as well. Anything that has a low smoke point is just going to burn a lot quicker. And when you see your oil start to smoke in your pan, that doesn't mean it's starting to burn. And it's going to really impart like a bitter flavor into your food. If it's like brief, then that's not a huge deal, but if you do see it start smoking, our general recommendation is to start again, kind of remove it, let it cool down. So when we've cooked with medium or medium high heat, try to use a vegetable-based oil that does have a higher smoke point. Okay, so got my aromatics in here. I just want to soften them a little bit. The heat is going to really activate those aromas. So didn't take long, and I'm by myself in this is our kitchen, by the way. Sorry, didn't mention that. We're in actually the basement of Toronto General Hospital. I don't know if anyone's had a chance to visit us before. We've been pretty locked down, obviously, since the pandemic, but we have a really nice space here. So once we are safe and open to having people again, I do invite any of you to come down. We do have a monthly class that is open to anyone that we're doing virtually, but hopefully we'll be able to do that in person again. Okay, so aromatics in there, pretty straightforward so far. And then I'm gonna add one more big aromatic, which is dried spices. Yes, absolutely. Yes, once it's safe to do so, hopefully we'll do another event in person. Awesome. So we're gonna use some dried spices, which are considered aromatics as well. Leanna mentioned some chilies, so dried chilies would be fantastic to add to this. You can add, dried oregano, like dried herb on the dried herb range, or in terms of spices, you can definitely add, dried cumin seed in here, or coriander. Really, whatever you want. This is completely up to you. For me, I love using garam masala. So this is garam masala. Has anyone used garam masala before? Has anyone heard of it before? So it's used a lot in South Asian cooking, a lot in Indian cuisine. You see it in Pakistani cuisine as well. It is a combination of different spices. So it usually has cinnamon, cardamom, ginger, cumin. It's just this incredibly fragrant, aromatic spice. It's not spicy in terms of heat, but it has this warmth to it, and it works incredibly well with soups, but orange vegetables, like carrots, sweet potato, squash. I find that it pairs really, really well with. So it is fairly available now. I see it in most grocery stores, but I'm sure you can even order it online. If you've never tried it before, give it a shot. It is really, really tasty. So I'm going to add that, about a tablespoon in here. Again, anytime you're using dried spices, even dried herbs, this is the time that you do want to add it. When you have that fat that you're cooking with that's warm, that's going to really activate a lot of the flavor, a lot of the aromas, and anything that's dry, and it brings out those essential oils as well. So if I were to add this at the end of my soup, like dried spice or dried, pinch of dried herb at the end, you're going to get a little bit of the flavor, but you're not going to really get a lot out of it. As well, because it's ground, it's like a powder, you're going to have this kind of powdery aftertaste or texture on your tongue, which isn't too pleasant. So cooking it out now during this process is the best way to kind of get rid of that. All right, dried spices, ginger, garlic. It's smelling really good in here. Again, sorry about that, but you're just going to have to try it yourself. Okay, so here we go. We have our garlic, we have our ginger, we have our garam masala in there. And now, really, you can add any vegetable you want. So if you want to make like a cauliflower soup out of this, throw some cauliflower in there. You can throw some, you make it easy. Throw some peel a few carrots, roughly chop them up, throw them in here. You have this beautiful garam masala carrot soup. The base of the soup and the big flavor component is done. This is what it is. So it'll carry really anything. But I did want to show you how to make the soup with squash. Especially now, I mean, we're getting to the fall, you're going to see probably a lot more local squash available. I'm already starting to see the big pumpkin and squash displays in the grocery store. But squash can be a little bit intimidating. So I don't know who's tried to like prep. Has anyone tried to prep through like squash before, like butternut squash, acorn squash? No, maybe some. Okay, someone said yes. Do you find it a little challenging? Maybe not. Yes, okay, good. I was hoping you would say yes. It is very hard to cut. These are very, very hard vegetables. They're also round. So anytime that you have a hard vegetable and it's round and you're kind of chasing it around your cutting board with a knife, it's not only hard, it's not the safest thing either, right? So this is something that we love to kind of focus on because there's a couple ways where we can approach some of these harder vegetables. And it's not just squash. You do have sweet potatoes, they're round, they're harder vegetable. You have celery roots, rutabaga. And I mean, it can sometimes deter you from even wanting to try the ingredients, right? Because it is a little more time consuming, a little more challenging to prep. So two things you can do. One thing is absolutely there is nothing wrong with using frozen. Okay, we love using frozen. We are big advocates for frozen fruits and vegetables. One thing that our dietitian loves to say is frozen is just as nutritious as fresh. Sometimes there's a misconception that it's not going to be as good or it's not going to be as nutritious. It's just as nutritious as fresh. So to take a frozen bag of butternut squash, it's already prepped, it's already peeled, it's washed, everything's done. You just throw it into the pot, liquid, let it simmer 10 minutes, and you're done. Right? So there's really nothing faster. And texture-wise, yes, okay, it's not gonna, like a frozen broccoli might not be as like crunchy or crispy as like fresh broccoli, but in a soup, it doesn't really matter. We want it soft, and we're gonna make this kind of like semi-pureed anyway, so that texture difference isn't really gonna impact us at all. So frozen, absolutely utilize it, especially now, especially, I don't know if anyone's noticed, but the prices of produce have sort of gone up quite a bit. So leaning on those frozen, the frozen fruits, frozen vegetables, it's usually a lot more economical. It lasts a lot longer. Keep it in your freezer for months, no problem. And the third thing, which I was going to mention that escaped me, the options. So when I started cooking, which was years ago, it might not seem like it, but I started cooking a long time ago, maybe like 20 years ago, I got into the industry, and freezer options were like corn, carrots, peas, and if you were lucky, you had like all three in a bag, which was awesome. But now, I mean, you have squash, you have beets, sweet potato, Brussels sprouts. I mean, there's so many options. So definitely, and someone mentioned it's cheaper. Yes, yeah, exactly. It's cheaper. So a lot of good things about frozen fruits and vegetables. And this is a great soup to kind of utilize that. Put in the extra work in the flavor. That's really where it counts. And then add a frozen bag, no problem. The second tip, and this is something that I'd like to do at home, especially when things are in season, maybe you want to buy a squash, okay? Use the tools that you have in the house. So if you do have access to an oven, that's a great way to kind of do most of that hard work for you, okay? So what I do with those squash or sweet potato or any of those hard vegetables, wash it really well, put it on a baking tray into the oven, 375 degrees, and then cook it until it's kind of soft to touch. So with like bigger squash, it might take like 70 minutes, which seems like a long time. But again, you're not doing anything. There's no active work there. Kind of throw it in, and obviously, pick a day where you're at home and you have the time, and maybe you're working on something else and you don't have to think about it. That time in the oven is going to soften the squash for you, which is going to make prep so much easier, which I'm going to show you in a second. But it's also going to give you this incredible caramelization, and that caramelization. So this caramelization here, which you can see, so this kind of browning, it's a lot of the water, which, I mean, these vegetables are mostly water, is evaporated, and you're getting this sort of browning and concentration of flavor. So it's just going to really, really intensify the flavor of the squash, just making it just so much more delicious. So I'm going to show you here now. So this squash, So for those who said that you do find it difficult to prep squash, this is kind of one of my favorite things to do. I mean, I can take a butter knife to kind of cut it open, but like super, super easy at this point. Everything is kind of caramelized and cooked. The skin comes off really, really easily. And you get these like beautiful little nuggets of squash done. This is butternut, and you can scoop up the seeds, which is really easy. This is actually, this one here, which it looks a lot darker. This is usually like a green, like a forest green color. This is Kabocha squash, or sometimes it's referred to as like a Japanese pumpkin. Keep an eye out for this in the grocery store. I am seeing it more and more in grocery stores. This is my favorite squash. It is really, really, really kind of dark orange. A lot less liquid, a lot less water content than the butternut squash, which just means that the flavor is just so much more concentrated. So this is great in soups, but if you are a fan of like making your own like squash breads or pies, this is the one to use, just because the water content is so low. So you have this like really kind of fluffy, starchy vegetable inside, which is really, really tasty. So I'm going to spend a second or two just scooping this out, adding it to our pot. Does anyone have any questions in the meantime?
Yes, I was just going to ask you about the seeds. Did you say that you were going to add them or not going to add them to the soup?
So I'm not going to add them to this. However, I mean, you don't have to throw them out. Like, you can treat them kind of like pumpkin seeds. It is a little extra work, but if you did want to save them, you can absolutely like wash them up and like kind of toast them in the oven. I mean, I'm not going to do that. I just don't have the time to do that. But if you did want to, you can. But for this, yeah, we want to scoop out the seeds.
Perfect.
So, oh, and then there's another question. Just bending down for a regular squash. You said, yeah, 375. So not Celsius. Good question. 375 Fahrenheit. Yeah, sorry. It's weird with cooking in Canada because we work off of metric, but then we flip back and forth. So it's, I don't know, it's more standard almost to see Fahrenheit for me, but 375 Fahrenheit. Yeah, Celsius, yeah, it'd be burning pretty quick, but yeah, 375. And just until, again, it's soft. Like for this squash, it took about 75 minutes. I do sweet potato like this as well, and it takes like 40 minutes. So yeah, you're just kind of, and every oven's a little different, right? So once you see sort of what it takes for you once, then you kind of know at that point. All right, so I'm going to add the kabocha. I'm going to add some of this butternut squash as well. And so I'm just doing enough for this soup. This here, because I'm doing 2 squash, like I'm probably going to be able to get, like, I know the recipe I included says, I think it's a 6 portions. I could probably easily squeeze 10 portions out of this. So, I mean, definitely, like, if you're going to put the work in once, you know, multiply the recipe. But, you know, that's the idea of batch cooking is, you know, if you're going to cook once a week, set yourself up for those kind of future dates where, you know what, you're going to be putting in long shifts, and, you know, there's only so much you can rely on that hot dog cart on the corner of University, which, I mean, don't get me wrong, it has serviced many healthcare workers over the years, but probably don't want to do it too often. So make a bigger batch here, and I'll show you a little tip on how to kind of store that. And then the other thing as well, this is something that we relate to our patients when we're cooking, is we did 2 squash here, but there's no reason, if you're going to be turning on the oven, if you're going to be using the energy anyways, throw in like 4 squash, put in like 12 sweet potato, roast them all to that point, and then scoop them up, put that cooked, roasted, caramelized squash and pumpkin in a freezer bag, and then pop it in the freezer. And then next time you're making a soup, or maybe you want to make something, maybe you want to make like a nice root mash for Thanksgiving, or you want to blend it into like a sauce and make like a really nice sauce for some pasta or something. You have it already done. You've already put the work in, and it lasts, because it's mostly water-based too. In the freezer, it lasts like 6 months easy. If you make sure that it's sealed well and it's not getting a lot of oxygen, then it'll last quite a long time. So yeah, maximize the effort on those days where you do have time and energy to cook. Okay, so squash is in. This, again, this is pretty much easy. This is done at this point. You can cover with liquid, call it a day, or give you the option. This is where you can sort of bump it up a little bit, nutritionally speaking. So this is one of our favorite little nutrition boosters. These are red lentils, split red lentils. Again, you can buy a bag of these for like a few bucks and last in your pantry for forever. But they provide a really nice punch of protein, fiber in it as well. And we love the split red lentils because it takes like 15 minutes tops to cook, and then it kind of disintegrates. And especially if you're not a big like lentil or bean fan, once you cook these until they sort of break down, we're going to blend them through the soup. You will not even notice that they're there. So they're kind of disintegrate, and they just help to kind of thicken up the soup a little bit as well. So in this case, not as necessary because we have a starchy vegetable. But if I had a can of tomato soup, okay, I'll give that as an example. Again, there's nothing wrong with, like, if you're on the go, you got to put a quick meal together, you got a can of soup, tomato soup, heat it up, but throw like a little handful of these red lentils in there and let it cook through. And if you did want to take the extra step, you don't have to blend it, but if you did want to take the extra step and blend it, you have this really nice, thick, rich tomato soup. You won't taste the lentils, but you've already transformed that tomato soup from a canned tomato soup into something that's so much better. Not only nutritionally speaking, like texture-wise, it's going to taste amazing. So really, really great little pantry ingredient staple that we love to use. So I'm going to throw about half a cup in here. You can definitely do a little bit more if you want. And then, so here we go. Soup is done. Cover it with liquid. There is so much flavor in here already. You can just add water, no problem, and it's going to be super, super tasty. If you do want to add like a veg stock or a chicken stock, add a couple seeds in here. Okay. If you do want to have a veg stock or a chicken stock, you can definitely add that as well. So you're going to add some more flavor. And that's it. So we're going to cook this into the point where it's ready to, where the lentils are soft. So this will take 15 minutes. And then we're going to finish with the coconut milk. So I'm going to show you that after. I'm going to move on to the next recipe, but lid on top. Let that simmer on medium low for about 15 minutes. Okay. So that is our first recipe, coconut soup. I told you I talked a lot. I apologize. Any questions about that one? I'm going to show you the finished version in about 10-15 minutes before we wrap up.
I have a question. Is the nutritional benefits of lentils different if you pick red versus green versus brown?
Good question. So this is usually our dietitian relaying the information. I know that she says they're very, very minor differences. So definitely choose any lentil. The more broken down they are, you're getting a little bit less fiber. So you'll see a little bit of a fiber difference. So like your split red lentils might not have as much fiber as like a brown lentil or a green lentil, but it's very minor differences. So they're all good. Choose whatever lentil you want. But just texturally speaking, I find that the red lentil is less noticeable and it cooks faster. So just from a time efficiency point of view, also if you're just like hesitant about trying lentils, start with the red ones. Hopefully that answers your question. I'm not sure who asked it, but okay. Okay, so we're gonna move on to the next recipe unless anyone has any questions. Good. Again, you can just ask anytime. All right, so we're going to make, this is a fish dish, but it's really the technique that I want to highlight, okay? And so this is cooking in papillote. I don't know how everyone's French is. Has anyone heard of that cooking technique before? No, okay, so, I mean, we're cooking in paper. It's pretty much a rough translation, and we're using parchment paper. So this technique, I'm a huge fan of for a few reasons. I mean, when we're talking about time efficiency, we want to keep in mind that cleanup is also part of the work for cooking, right? So we want to sort of cheat through that as much as possible. Cooking in these little paper parchment packages that we're going to make, it's just going to mean less dishes to wash. We don't need like a pan, especially if we're using more delicate protein. So something like fish, which can be a little intimidating to cook, you know, especially if you're cooking it like in a pan. How much oil do I have to need? I don't want it to stick. Or if I'm cooking it like on a barbecue, is it going to fall apart? This is just a really, really nice, gentle way to cook the fish that doesn't really need a lot of tools or equipment. So it's going to be easy to prepare, but it's also going to save you on the back end when it comes to cleanup. All right, so I'm going to bring it down to the cutting board here. And we're starting off with obviously our parchment paper. Now, if you've never used this before, you can find this pretty much every grocery store. I think the dollar store even has it now. So it's pretty accessible. Just make sure it's parchment, not wax paper, which you don't want to put in the oven. All right, so taking a piece of parchment, folding it in half, okay? And then pretty much we're gonna add our ingredients to the one half. Now we're using fish, but if you're not a big fan of fish, you can use this technique for pretty much anything. So I've done this before with like a boneless piece of chicken breast, just kind of butterfly the chicken breast, put that in there, threw in, you know, a bunch of peppers and onions and seasoned it up and, you know, made a really good sort of meal that way. If you want to make it completely vegetarian, you can do it that way as well. You know, throw in like rinsed can of chickpeas, season them up, throw them in there with a bunch of veg, package it up, and it makes a really good meal. So the technique works for pretty much any protein. I wouldn't put anything that's going to take a really long time. So like a bone-in, you know, cut would take a longer time. I wouldn't do that. But like a boneless piece of chicken breast, butterflied, you know, any fish, those will work really well. So the fish that we're using today, this is steelhead trout. This is just, you know, one of my favorite fish to use, but you can use any fish here. And it doesn't have to be skinless. You can even use frozen fish. I keep quite a bit of frozen fish at home. And you can find them now kind of individually vacuum packed. So it stays pretty well, like a few months without freezer burn, which is great. But anyways, piece of fish on the bottom, in the middle there, and then we can kind of play with our veg. So that's kind of nice too. Is like everything kind of cooks together in this package. So for our veg, again, it could be anything. I had some leftover onion from the first recipe. So just kind of slice that up. I'm gonna put that in there. And I have some frozen green beans. So again, going back to my freezer frozen discussion, if you're afraid of frozen fruits and vegetables, don't be. Like, they're amazing. And these green beans work even from the freezer. Texturally, they actually stay really, really nice and crispy. So one of my favorites to use. So I'll put a little handful. Frozen green beans in there. Stem, okay. And to flavor this now, I mean, again, you can use different spices. Some of you mentioned some different herbs. You know, whatever you like would work well in here. I'm going to lean on citrus. Okay, so using orange. Citrus has one of those amazing ways to be a flavor enhancer. Okay, so when we think of salt, salt, you add it to most dishes. We add it to most dishes because it enhances the flavor of whatever you add it to. Okay, salt inherently in itself is not adding the flavor. It's enhancing the flavor of whatever you add it to. Acid works the exact same way. So vinegar, lemon juice, lime juice, orange juice acts as a flavor enhancer. It is bringing its own flavor, but it's also going to make the green bean flavor kind of pop a little bit, and the onion and the ginger and the spices and the herbs. So it is a really nice kind of culinary tool to take advantage of, especially when I'm going pretty simple with my ingredients, right? I just have my fish, green bean, and onions. And we can use the whole citrus as well. So I'm going to be using the outside. This is our zest. Just wash the citrus really well. And we just want the very outside of that. And whether it's a lime or lemon or orange, most of those essential oils of that orange, lemon, lime are in the zest. Okay, so it is an ingredient we probably often just throw out, right? We just use it as the juice, but you can use it to really add a lot of flavor to your dishes. Also, if you are just using like the lime for, I don't know, cold beer or something, you zest it first. Don't throw it out. Zest it, and you can freeze it, and then it'll stay in the freezer for quite some time, and then you can add it to a dish next time you need it. Okay, so we're going to throw in some zest. I'm going to throw in a little bit of juice as well, probably like 2 tablespoons ish in here. It's awesome. And then I'll grate in some garlic as well, just because I like the garlic. Again, this would be a really good opportunity if you like chilies. Like, chilies would add a really nice punch of flavor to this. Okay, and then I'm going to just add a little bit of olive oil. Again, I don't need too much. The olive oil is, again, just as a fat, it's going to help to bring all the flavors together and just make it a little bit tastier. And maybe a small pinch of salt. Again, don't need too much, right? We're just using it to kind of enhance the flavors we put on it. Also, I'll mention sometimes frozen, like the freezing process of fruits and vegetables, does dull the flavor a little bit. So if you warm it up, that helps. Or if you do add a little bit of acid, that helps as well. All right, so give this a little toss. I'm using a bowl here, just because it's easier for me to move around, but you can even just toss it right onto the paper. Save yourself another dish to clean. All right, and that's gonna go all those green beans right on top. Probably have to make a second package after, because I did quite a bit. And then any of that little dressing, so that orange, that olive oil, just kind of pour that liquid in. That extra liquid is gonna help to steam everything inside as it cooks. Okay, so we have our fish. We have our really colorful veg. Again, if you want to throw some herbs on there, cherry tomatoes, whatever you want, it'll work. And now I'm gonna package this up. So the lid is kind of the other half of the parchment. That goes over. And then from this back corner here, I'm gonna fold that in. just until it sort of borders up against our ingredients. And then I'll take half of that, fold that in, fold that in. So we're kind of just folding that edge in on itself to create like a seal. It does not have to look pretty. Mine never looked great. And once we get to the end here, so we've made our way sort of all the way around the edge. Once we get to that last piece, that goes under and kind of give it a little pinch, okay? So what we have is this little package with all of our ingredients inside. And so when this cooks, it's baking, but it's also steaming, okay? So it does a few things. Most of the aromas actually don't escape, right? Some will, but a lot of them stay inside. So it actually kind of flavors itself in here, which is kind of neat. Also, for purposes like when we teach it, if there's some individuals that deal with nausea as a side effect of the treatment, especially when cooking fish, this definitely helps to keep the fish aroma down quite a bit. So that's nice, especially if you are cooking a lot of fish and you don't want to smell the whole house up with fish. Try this technique; it works really, really well. That's about it. The fish thickness is what we're looking at for cook time. So it's about 10 to 15 minutes for every inch thickness. Okay, so this for me, I know in my oven at 375, it's going to take about 13 minutes. Every oven's a little different. Once you do it once, you're cooking until the fish flakes apart really easily. You know the amount of time that you need for your oven, but 10 to 15 minutes for every inch thickness is general rule of thumb. So for this little piece here, which is like a little less than an inch, if I had a whole side of trout that was the same thickness, it's the same cooking time. Okay, so never go with the length, you always go with the thickness of the fish. All right, so that's gonna go into the oven. I'm gonna get that cooked up. But again, when thinking about meal planning, right? So that's a big part of time efficiency. Put the work in once. There's no reason you can't make like 10 of these. Okay, when you have the time to cook, make like 10 of these. Put them in a freezer bag. Pop them in your freezer. Okay, pre-pandemic, I would do this for my brother like all the time. He just moved out. I'd fill up his freezer with like 12 of these. He got home from work, took it out of the freezer, into the oven, added like 5-6 minutes because it's frozen, and he had a meal ready to go. Right, so again, maximizing that time that you do have to set yourself up for those days that you don't have time to cook. The only difference, if you are cooking them to freeze, don't add any acid. Okay, so no lime juice, no orange, no lemon. That's going to start to change the texture of the protein you add it to. So just add like a tablespoon of water and then freeze it as is, and then you can finish it after you cook it with like a little lime or lemon if you want. Okay, so I'm going to pop this in the oven. Where's my pan? There it is. Get that going. All right, any questions about that one? Everyone still with me? Good, awesome. All right, is this something you think some of you might try? Maybe some of you have already tried it before. All right, I'll take that as a maybe. Maybe we'll try it, that's good. Okay, how are we doing for time? Okay, so we're doing about what, 10-15 minutes?
Yeah, I think we have about 15 minutes.
Okay, all right, so I'm gonna do this last one, and then I should be able to plate everything to show you what it looks like. All right, so we're going to make, this is kind of like a breakfast cookie, or you can call it like an energy snack. I think energy balls, there's like a thing that's going around now trending. I just love this recipe because you don't have to, it doesn't take any baking. So you don't have to even turn on any oven. You just got to kind of combine a bunch of ingredients together. And it makes this really nice little nice little snack that has protein, a little bit of fiber, and a little bit of healthy fat too. So really, really nice little trio of ingredients when you just need, a little snack from the cupboard or the freezer. So we're gonna make lemon, what do they call these? I think lemon cashew breakfast cookies, no bake. All right. So again, I'm gonna bring it down here. We are using a food processor. So sometimes I get asked, like, what tools do I need in the kitchen, to kind of like, kickstart my cooking habits. It's really like a knife. Get yourself one knife. You don't need a knife block. You don't need like 10 different types of knives. Get one good chef's knife. Like, instead of investing like $300 in a block, put the money into one good chef's knife, because that is pretty much going to do most of the work for you. Okay. And then a good food processor. This is a great tool to do a lot of the prep for you. Okay, you can like chop through onions, carrots, veg. You can make really nice sauces, pestos, purees. Bake. You can do most of your processing if you're making like a pie or some baked goods. This is a really, really, really great tool, and they've come down in price. Like, you can get some you can get that probably like $600. You can probably get some like in that $50 to $60 range, which isn't too bad. We use this probably outside of my knife in our kitchen here. We use this probably more than anything else. Okay, then maybe a blender, but this is a workhorse for us. So if you are looking to invest in some tools, you don't have one already, have a look at some different food processors that are out there. Okay. All right. So for these cookies, we're going to start off with some cashews. These are just like unsalted cashews, about a cup. You can use almonds in here. You can use peanuts if you want. You can any nuts really will work for this. About a cup. I'm not measuring. It's okay. Don't worry. Then we're going to go with some oats. So probably heard of like whole grains. Eat your whole grains. It's really good for you. Oats, one of my favorite whole grains. These are just regular flaked oats. These are they're called large flake, but you can use like even like the quick flake. They're just broken down a little bit further. Either or will work. Just don't use steel cut. Steel cut are still unpressed or rolled. They'll be way too hard. But any flaked oat will work. So I'm going to go about half a cup-ish. And then I had some unsweetened coconut. I just kind of like the flavor of it, so I'm going to add that. If you don't have unsweetened coconut, go for a full cup of oats. Okay, so you need like a cup in total of this like kind of dry mix. So I'm going half and half, but if you don't have the coconut or you don't like coconut, go for a full cup of oats. All right. And then to kind of make this a little more like kind of breakfasty and again bump up that health component, we're gonna use some seeds. And again, use what you have. Like sunflower seeds are something I always keep around because they're pretty cheap and you can kind of throw them in anything. So sunflower seeds will work. I've got chia seeds. I think on the recipe I may have wrote in chia seeds. Those are great, but hemp seeds, pumpkin seeds, all really good. And I'll probably do like a couple tablespoons. The nice thing about the chia seed, and it's the same for like flaxseed, is they absorb quite a bit of excess moisture. So for something like this, I do want it to be kind of on, I don't want it to be wet, right? I want it to be kind of on the drier side, kind of like a cookie. So those chia seeds will help to absorb any excess moisture. So you can, if you have them, you can add them in. But flaxseed also does the same thing. Okay, and then we're gonna use some lemon, some really nice punch of flavor, and same thing, going for the zest, because that's gonna give me most of that kind of lemony flavor. It's gonna be in the oils on the outside. So I'm gonna use zest as much as you want. It's just kind of fun. Your whole hand is gonna smell like lemons. Your whole kitchen's probably gonna smell like lemons. All right, so I'm gonna do whole lemon, and then I'm gonna probably do just a little bit of juice, not too much, because again, I don't want to make this too wet. So I'll probably go with like a tablespoon of that lemon juice. And again, this is just the flavor piece, so it's not integral for the recipe. If you do want to flavor it with something else, if you want to put in like some like cocoa powder, you know, throw that in. That would be kind of cool. If you want to throw in like some cinnamon instead, that would be really tasty. The lemon here is just going to be sort of our main flavor component. And then, a little bit of maple syrup. So for sweetness, we love maple syrup, or you can use honey too. It's still sugar, right? The way we kind of reference is sugar, doesn't matter. But we're adding small amount, we're in control of it. So I'm just doing like 2 tablespoons for this huge batch, so it's not too much. And that's it. I'm gonna blend this up. I am gonna also mute myself because that would be very annoying. So you might, halfway through, you might just want to scrape down the sides, like maybe once or twice, just so you make sure everything gets broken down. And you're going to see it's going to start clumping together, which is exactly what we want. Doesn't have to be like smooth like peanut butter, but almost think of like, I guess, like a kind of like a cookie batter, like a little bit of like a textured cookie batter is what we're looking for. All right, so this is good to go. And so at this point, once you can kind of like scoop up a nice little bunch, nice little handful, again, it's kind of like a cookie dough. Now, if you notice that it's very wet, very sticky, just throw in a few more oats and blend it up again, okay? Again, it's one of those recipes, we're not baking it, it doesn't have to be an exact science. You just kind of adjust. Okay? If it's super dry, throw in a little bit more like lemon juice or maple syrup to add a little bit more moisture. But it, again, should kind of roll together, but not be sticky to the touch. And then at this point, you can, again, if you want to have those like kind of energy ball kind of things, you can just leave it like this, or we can kind of flatten them into like cookies. I'll do a couple here. And again, these are just really convenient to kind of have in the freezer. So that's where I would put them. I'd store them in the freezer because they just last a lot longer. But again, no baking required. These are just like a nice kind of little bite. And because there's relatively no water, no moisture in these, you don't really have to defrost them much. Like once you take them out of the freezer, even if they sit for like 30 seconds, that's when I started eating them. And they're really, really good. Really nice texture. So, you know, done a couple, and I want to get kind of fancy. Maybe I'll throw a little bit of coconut on top, or like pumpkin seeds, or maybe some chia seeds on there. Cool. So we have our little cashew lemon cookies, no bake. give these a shot. They're honestly really, really tasty. And I'll like put, again, double, triple the recipe if you like them. Yeah, try it first maybe before you double them or triple them, but they do taste good. And then you keep these again in the freezer. I try to have them stocked as often as possible. And then when I need that, especially for me, like that 3 o'clock, 4 o'clock hits, and I need that like kind of like sweet little protein snack, these are perfect. So that's this recipe. I'm gonna plate up the last two, but can you have them every day? So, I mean, yeah, sure, it's up to you. I mean, you know, I'm not a dietitian, so I can't tell you, but they're healthy. I mean, these are a healthy snack, right? Like these are like nuts and seeds, healthy fats, fiber, protein. You're good to go. You probably don't want to eat like, 10 of these in a day, probably way too much, but they're really, really good. So with that being said, that's the last recipe. Thank you so much for having me today. Hopefully you did learn a little something. And again, I'm part of the Princess Margaret here at UHN, and if you have any more questions for even if for patients or for yourself, we have lots of resources, cooking and nutrition resources available, which happy to post. Maybe I can even type it in the chat, or Leanna, if there's another place we can post it, we can do that. But if you have any other questions, please feel free to ask. I'll plate up the last two so you kind of have a visualization of what they look like. But yes, thanks again.
Thank you so much, Geremy. This has been amazing. I want to stay and just see what the plated final product looks like for sure. But I think we can definitely circulate some of that info, like those links following today's session. If people want more information and want to look for you, whether it's for their patients or for other reasons, I think that's a great idea. We can definitely circulate those.
Perfect. So, fish. All right, so I'm finishing this soup here with the coconut milk. So I always put it at the end. And you can use like a light coconut milk, or depends on, if you want a little bit richer, use a full fat. If you want a little bit lighter, you don't really have to cook it much. That residual heat is just going to help kind of make everything sort of homogenized here. And like I said, you can blend this so it's like a puree, so it's like a nice thick puree. Or if you do prefer it kind of like rustic, so you can see a little bit of the squash, see a little bit of the onion, kind of like it like that too sometimes. That smells, sorry, it smells terrible. Maybe we'll right. All right, so here's the soup. And again, really, I only needed to cook it until the lentils kind of got soft. And then here is what that parchment package looks like. And what's nice is, again, this is how it's served usually in restaurants too. So it kind of feels a little fancy, which is nice, treat yourself. And what I'll do is, if you're taking it right out of the oven, just be careful because the steam is going to escape as soon as you open it up. So we're going to tear off this top piece here. And there is, again, the beans are like perfectly cooked. Most of that aroma, like I said, stays inside. But as soon as I opened it up, you get this like big punch of orange and garlic. And then that fish is, again, just beautifully cooked underneath. And again, it's because there's a lot of moisture in there. Even if you overcook it by a few minutes, it still stays nice and kind of juicy because it's sealed. Versus if it's open, then it'll dry out a little bit quicker. But there we go. There's our little fish package, soup, cookies, and that is it for me. So thank you again. Happy National Postdoc Appreciation Week, and have a wonderful weekend, everyone.
Thanks again, Geremy. On behalf of the UHN Postdoc Association and the ORT, we just want to say a huge thank you for sort of finishing our week on such a high note. I think that was the perfect way to close off our Friday. And I don't know about everyone else, but I'm really hungry. So I'm looking forward to trying one of your recipes tonight for sure. So thanks again for all of your time. Simon, did you want to say anything else that I've forgotten?
No, not really. Like, thank you, Geremy, a lot. I was like really impressed with all the recipes. I'm doing all of them. I mean, 100%, especially the cookies. I can't wait. I already sent my girlfriend to buy the coconut and all the stuff, you know, that I don't have. So yeah, it's amazing. Yeah, thank you very much.
Well, let me know if you have any questions, and if they don't taste good, then you don't have to reach out. That's okay. But
well, I'm pretty sure they will be very, very tasty.
Awesome. And we'll definitely try to come visit you in person one day in your kitchen.
Yes, yeah, absolutely. Again, you know, when we're safe to do so, we, you know, our kitchen, we're in the basement of Toronto General. Just ask about us, someone will point you in the right direction. And we do have a third Thursday class that we live stream virtually right now that, again, is open to anyone. It's on our YouTube channel at 12 p.m. So if you ever wanted some more inspiration or more recipes, you can check that out as well.
Perfect. Thank you so much.
Thanks, everyone. Take good care. Bye.
Bye.
Bye.